Good afternoon and welcome to AIADA's AutoTalk. I'm your host, Rachel Soleimani. Before we get started, a few quick reminders. Anyone who is registered for today's program will be receiving a copy by the end of this week. And if you have any questions, be sure to enter them into the Q&A bar at the lower right-hand side of your interface. For our last webinar of 2023, we welcome back our friend Doug Austin, CEO of Strategic Source. Doug, I know you have a lot to get to today, so I'll let you take it away.
Rachel, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today, this December day. Hopefully, there's not a lot of snow where you're at. I'm in Minnesota. Last year, I think we had 2 or 3 feet of snow at this time of the year. And right now, all we see is grass. But the topic today is really the 20 best ideas to reduce costs, improve profits in 2024. We know that dealers are challenged right now, that sales aren't as strong as you expected them to be, and expense reduction, cost reduction is top of mind. So the webinar is really going to focus on 2 groups of 10 best ideas, 10 more strategic and tactical ideas within your structure, and then 10 specific category ideas that can also reduce costs and improve profitability. So, and if you're interested, we have a QR code that you can scan, and we can get a copy of this deck out to you right away. So with that, we'll get going. A little bit about Strategic Source. We've been in dealership space since 2001. We're supporting about 1,500 dealerships. We reduce costs by 25%, 600 million in savings. We're Minnesota based, but we've got clients all over the country, and we're veteran owned. So what we'll focus on today is opportunities for dealerships. We'll talk about the scope a little bit. We'll talk about the 20 best ideas to cut costs, kind of summarize those, and then if you need assistance, we can help you out as much. How much money are you leaving on the table? Well, we know that dealers are leaving about 25% of their annual spend on the table. Well, we'll talk about some metrics in a couple of minutes, but a 25 mil or $50 million dealership is going to spend about 5% of their total sales on services and supplies. So leaving 25% on the table can be pretty considerable, not only annually, but if you look at that over a period of time. This chart just shows you a dealership at 25, 50, 75, $300 million. Again, assuming the 5%, which is pretty close to what we see dealers consistently spend. You can see what the spend percentage is here for service and supplies, the savings opportunity, and what the annual savings could be. $312,000 for even the smallest of dealerships, up to 3.7 for a $300 million dealership. And if you look at that on a monthly basis, pretty compelling as well. This is just at the expense category opportunities. This doesn't include other kind of top line revenue generating opportunities. So 25% of your spend is typically what dealers overspend on. There's a research group out there called the Aberdeen Group, does a lot of purchasing research, and they will, based on the results of their research, say that if you don't have a dedicated and highly functioning purchasing department, you will overspend by 25%. That is exactly what we're seeing in the dealership space. So dealers spend 5% of their revenues on services and supplies. They overspend by 25%. A dealership with 50 million in annual sales will spend 2.5 million. That dealership will overspend by 625,000. Why is that? Well, the business problem is that there's really a broad scope of expense categories. There's 130 categories out there, and I'll show you those in a minute. So there's a lot of ground to cover. There's probably more expense categories in dealerships than any other vertical market that we work in. We work in schools, manufacturing, professional services. Dealerships just have many more opportunities to spend money across categories. And again, I'll show you what those are. Dealers tend to be very tactical. They're firefighting in their approach to cost reduction efforts. And what I mean by that is that there's not a organized approach to attack those categories in a methodical manner or a prioritized manner. Number three, they're short staffed. Dealers are running with thin staffing. Number four, there really is no plan in place to attack these categories. Here's the QR code. If you want to scan that quick, get a copy of this presentation. It'll take you to a landing page where we'll get your information and get this deck over to you right away. So let's talk about expense category scope for a second. First of all, some facts that you should know. Again, there's about 160 categories out there, category options. Dealers tend to spend money consistently in about 100 of those. Again, they spend 5% of their total sales. A $100 million group will spend $5 million. They tend to have suppliers, too many suppliers. If you think of 100 expense categories, ideally, if you had a narrow supply base, you'd only have 200 suppliers in your database. But we know that most dealers have 400 suppliers, and we've seen that category ratio go as high as 200 to 1. It's just incredible how many suppliers and how much waste can be involved with the supply base. Again, the cost reduction opportunity is 25%, and we see about 95% of dealerships do not have a purchasing department, and meaning dedicated people that are focused on these categories, repetitive purchase categories. The locations have the freedom to select their own suppliers, which explains why there's so many suppliers and dealers are overspending. There are 72 general expense categories that everyone will use, and this is a list from advertising, it's all alphabetical, to uniforms and laundry. So whether you're a church, a manufacturing company, a CPA firm, or a dealership, you're probably going to spend money in these services. There are another 56 expense categories. It's just in the automotive side, anywhere from aftermarket accessories to vehicle history and hazardous waste. So we're at 72 and 56, we're already at 128. And then when you add in facilities that every dealer owns their own building, typically, you add in another 15. So it's not hard to see how we can get into 140 expense categories pretty easily. So the point here is that the scope is quite broad and there is a lot to manage. So with that, now we're going to shift into, well, what do we do to reduce costs? How can we improve profitability in 2024? So here's some things. Idea number one, get a spend analysis going. So create a plan. So the action is develop a plan or spend analysis, capture all the data from 12 months to develop a prioritized plan to attack those categories. The responsibility should be led by the executive team, the CFO or the controller. It's going to take about 12 to 16 hours to develop that plan. But what I'm showing you here in the bottom of the page is what that data extract looks like. Out of your DMS system, it should tell you the dealership location, the type of expense, the GL code, the vendor name, the GL description, and how much you spent for that with that dealer or with that vendor over the past 12 months. And what you're going to need to do is just go in and code it. Auto tires, waste recovery, whatever the case, office supplies, print. But that's the first idea. Get a spend analysis and get that planning going for 2024. Here's what the final result looks like. We get credit bureau, shop supplies, and uniform scheduled for October, credit card, office supplies, beverages for November, and so on and so forth. But you see what this can result in, and it starts to create kind of a methodical, prioritized plan to attack all of your expense categories. What we try to do here is show what the total spend is, what the savings might be based on some of these estimates. and then what the total supplier count is too, because that is something that we want to attack is its supplier count. Number two, create some objectives for 2024. We want to make sure that we create smart objectives. So the smart objectives meaning that they're specific, measurable, action oriented, attainable, results oriented, and time phased. If you have an objective written with all of that criteria, we ought to be in pretty good shape. But we ought to focus on generating, and I would say to most organizations here, um, try to achieve at least a quarter million in savings, 250,000. And for any group that's larger than 50 million in sales, I think it's reasonable to expect 500,000 in cost savings. Set that objective. And then we might also want to set an objective around supply-based reductions. Idea number three, build an internal sourcing team to get these objectives done. What we're trying to do is assign the categories to folks within your team. If you don't have a purchasing department, you still have to negotiate with these suppliers. So the benefit here is we're going to have clear responsibility. We're going to be able to forecast benefits. So the responsibility here is really the management team to assign team members. It's going to take an hour or two for selection, explanation, alignment. But typically, a CFO, controller, office manager, GM, fixed ops, service and parts managers could be ideal members for that team. And you've got so many categories that we're going to have to get that thing divvied up and everybody working towards the same end. Idea number four, let's get a set of purchasing policies in place that that provide guidance and limits internal staff relative to commitment of company funds. There's three ways to spend money in an organization. One is a contract, another is a PO, and another is an invoice approval. You want to have this approval authority matrix in place that says there are limits to who can sign at what levels. Maybe this director of operations can spend up to $10,000 on a contract, or maybe 5,000. But we want to set limits in here, and it doesn't mean we're trying to take authority away, but we are trying to set limits and guardrails about who can spend money, and more importantly, who can bring new suppliers into the equation that we're going to have to manage from this point on. So number four, get your purchasing policies in place. Number five, get a contract tracking management system in place. Why? Well, to create visibility to commitments and mitigate risk. We don't want contracts auto renewing. We want to identify them. We want to get them managed. We want alerts created that, 90 to 120 days before that contract renews so that we can be proactive on that. It might take 12 to 16 man hours to get all those contracts identified, but you can do it as simply as putting them into Outlook. If the due date is December 31st, well, then maybe you put a reminder in on August 15th to take a look at that contract. But tracking and managing contracts is going to create peace of mind and certainly going to eliminate a lot of headaches and worries about price increases and contracts auto renewing. Number six, let's get a preferred supplier program in place. I told you earlier, one of my fears in dealerships is that they have way too many suppliers. And one way to think about this, if your company, if your dealership has 100 expense categories that you're spending money in repetitively, ideally you should have a 2-to-1 ratio, 200 suppliers, and think of it as a primary and a backup. And that should be enough. Now, there are some categories where you're going to want 4 or 5, maybe even 6. And that's in the auto parts side. When, one auto parts company doesn't have the part you need, you go to supplier number 2 or number 3. But what the objective here is that we're trying to increase your purchasing leverage, spend more money with fewer suppliers, and then have fewer suppliers to manage and reduce that back office cost while you're improving your leverage. So you can see down here that suppliers, supplier ratio, and ultimately our invoices that we have to process are going to shrink too. We can accomplish all of this with a preferred supplier program at your dealership. Number 7, to get the 8-step sourcing process in place. This process works whether you're sourcing HVAC maintenance or health insurance or credit card processing or credit bureaus or shop supplies. We want to get the purpose is to get a consistent, proven approach to all sourcing. If we do this, if your dealership does this, you will take that 25% cost out over time. You'll get truth in the marketplace. And by that, what I mean is when you go out for quote and you get 4 quotes, you're going to see what the market will charge for that cutoff wheel or that credit bureau or that DMS system or whatever the case may be, floor plan financing. You're going to see what the costs are and what the opportunities are, and you're going to take costs out of your system. The 8-step sourcing process is pretty simple. Get the requirements down, source the suppliers, develop a quote, analyze the quotes and negotiate, develop the solution, recommend and notify your suppliers, implement it, and then audit it later. That's it. If you do that with your expense categories across the dealership, you will take that 25% out. Build a team to source the categories. We talked about the CFO, controller, office manager, GM. Those are the people that would source those categories. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but they need to execute that process. Number 8, implement early payment discounts with all suppliers. So if we have shrunk our supplier base, now we can start to take advantage of early payment terms. And what I recommend is negotiate a 2% discount if you pay within 10 days. And if you don't pay within 10 days, then the balance is due within 30. So we call that 210 net 30. Reduce the cost with providers by 2% by paying early. Obviously, the benefit is we're going to bring more dollars to your bottom line. The responsibility here is CFO, controller, office manager. It's going to take a little bit of time to do this, but this is why it's so important to reduce that supplier base. Again, we'll increase our purchasing leverage with fewer suppliers, and then we'll be able to go after early payment discounts as well. Number 9, let's pay these suppliers with a credit card. About 70+% of suppliers out there today will accept credit card for payment. And the best way to do this today is to do it with cash back, not points. Points are becoming less and less valuable as airlines jack those fees up for a round trip ticket. So the responsibility here would be the CFO, controller, office managers, AP staff, but pay as much as you can on a credit card. The discount opportunities are between 1.5% and sometimes 2%. If you use your bank that you're doing floor plan and doing your typical banking with, that's usually a good approach because they'll oftentimes give you more than the 1.5% cash back. So that's number 9. Get credit card payment with as many of your suppliers as you can. Number 10, implement new audit recovery and revenue categories to drive top line profits. So we all pay bills and we all tend to overpay on those bills. And some examples I would tell you are utilities, your FedEx and UPS shipping. They don't deliver on time, or if they're late, they owe you money back. Um, Telecom providers can provide recoveries. There's a number of suppliers out there that will take a look at various expense categories for you, sometimes on a contingent basis to help you recover lost dollars. And while you may not be excited about a contingency agreement with some of those folks, If you don't do it at all, you're not going to recover anything. And if you do recover dollars, you're going to probably get between 60 and 50% back. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. So again, audit recovery, new revenue opportunities to drive top line. Now we're going to get into some expense categories, some actual expense categories that can help you drive bottom line improvement. One of the things we had a dual point West Coast group that took a look at their audit warranty recovery rates from the OEMs. The purpose, again, we're trying to reduce costs and improve profits. The benefit here was we pulled in $1.3 million over the agreement life, about 450,000 for year one. The responsibility here was the dealer principal and the fixed ops director. They hadn't reviewed their reimbursement rates for 2 years, and they were pretty surprised at the results that we found. So take a look at that. Your warranty, both your parts and labor recovery rates. Number 12, small package transportation. Everybody is shipping FedEx and UPS today. UPS seems to be more common in the parts departments, but there are opportunities. Now, come January, prices will go up as they do every year. But there are resellers out there, depending on your area, that can provide the exact same level service with the exact carrier, but at a lesser cost. And here was a case where we were able to pull in almost $400,000, about 130,000 annually, by using a reseller that essentially represents, I believe in this case it was FedEx. The FedEx drivers continue to pick up the same level of service, but we were just able to ride now on a cheaper rate because the reseller had more aggregate volume and better pricing. So take a look at small package transportation. Number 13, telecom services. We had a three-store group in the Southwest. Client wanted a new telecom solution. Went out for RFPs, not an RFQ, but RFP, asking the suppliers to tell the dealer what they thought would be the best solution, because telecom is changing quite a bit. The whole objective was to enhance capabilities and ultimately reduce cost. We did this in our own office about a year ago. We got rid of our phone system entirely and went totally internet. So there are a lot of opportunities out there. In this particular case, we were able to shave off about $124,000 annually. Ideally, the CFO drives this change in the organization. It might be the dealer principal, but there's a lot of technologies out there that are available that can cut your costs. Idea 14, accounts payable processing. We had a large group that was interested in looking at options to improve AP, both timeliness and efficiency. We looked at some suppliers for this particular client, and um, we found one that could produce about $102,000 a year in savings, both rebates and reduce staffing. So rebates for early payment discounts, credit card use, and reduce staffing on the AP side. So the CFO, the office manager are key here, but there are opportunities to simplify the AP side. Again, it's going to be inherently reliant on reducing that supply base, because that can drive your costs quite a bit. This was a large East Coast group that we worked with. Number 15, we had a large multi-store Ohio group. We conducted an RFQ on credit bureaus. Looked to suppliers to get new credit bureau pricing. There are suppliers here, as you know, Direct, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. There are also resellers of those services that can provide some pretty interesting rates as well. So in this case, we're able to pull in almost $100,000, $95,000 in credit bureau rate reductions, and improve the process too. A lot of dealers will just automatically pull three bureaus every time somebody walks in, and quite frankly, you should revise that process where you're only pulling one. If you don't get the result you want, then you pull the second. And if you don't get the result you want, then pull the third. So the volume of credit bureaus that you pull directly impacts your cost. And so between a rate change and a process change, you're looking at about $8,000 a month net to the bottom line. Number 16. Credit card processing. Boy, there's a lot of changes going on in credit cards right now. You have the traditional credit card service where you pay a fee every month to the credit card company, and there's also now the surcharge programs where you give the client the option. They pay a higher fee with a credit card or a lower with a surcharge program where they're essentially eating the credit card cost. Dealers are saving big dollars. Where 2 years ago, dealers weren't interested in surcharge programs. Today, we're implementing those all over with a number of qualified suppliers out there. So take a look at this. In this particular case, we used a traditional merchant processing approach. The controller and the CFO were involved and moved them to a new supplier. In fact, today, I just saw some email traffic a little while ago for a single dental office in the Midwest here. We were able to cut that cost by about $36,000 a year just on the credit card side. So there are a lot of opportunities, regardless of what business you're in credit card merchant processing. So take a look at that. Number 17, classified listings at a large Wisconsin group. They wanted us to look at, how they were reselling their new and used cars. We benchmarked and then renegotiated with a large supplier. We were able to reduce their costs. We took a nice dent out, about $70,000 for on an annual basis. And we really worked with the general manager in this case, but we looked at data. We renegotiated with the incumbent from a position of strength because we knew what other dealers were paying for that same service and in the same geography with comparable inventory levels. So take a look at that. Marketing is one of the largest expenses that dealers have. That and floor plan and DMS. Um, and there's an awful lot of consolidation going on in that space, but it's worth taking a look at. Number 18, take a look at shop supplies. This is a four-store Southeast group. The dealer wanted a fresh quote on all shop supplies. In the shop supply space, you can do a vendor managed program where the vendor comes in, counts your inventory, and then decides what to refill. And you can do a customer managed where you are in control of that. You tell the supplier what to refill. My recommendation is you look at that customer managed approach because they tend to, I think dealers tend to manage their inventory a little closer and there's less likelihood of being oversupplied. In this particular case, we were able to take about 52,000 out of the annual shop supply expense, which is a little bit more than $4,000 a month. We benchmarked, we compared alternatives, you know, but we ended up the result was that we ended up moving to a new supplier with a customer ordering process versus vendor ordering. So this was a pretty productive change. Number 19, printed products. Every dealer is buying stationery, envelopes, business cards, thank you notes. There's about 450 items that dealers are buying at any given time. Stickers, tags, labels, folders, you name it. Well, printed products is a big category. It's a complex category because there's so many items. It does tend to be custom produced in a lot of cases, but in this case, dealer wanted to reduce costs and improve terms so we could get the discounts and credit card. We shopped around, did some quoting, some analysis, and we were able to take another 52,000 out of this, um, primarily from improved pricing, payment, and business terms. The print industry tends to be pretty competitive. You have national suppliers, some big names that you know. You have regional suppliers, and you certainly have local suppliers. So it's a three-tier supplier base, but it's competitive, and there's no point in overpaying when you can get the product, the quality that you're looking for, the service that you're looking for at a price that's competitive. Our last idea here of the 20 is vehicle history reports. We have a four-store Eastern group that wanted to look at vehicle history reports. They thought the pricing was getting a little bit out of line. We benchmarked. The objective again was to reduce costs, and we found about a $37,000 savings working with the general manager controller. They decided to make a change of providers to cut costs with comparable reporting results. I know the biggest game in town is one company, but the second biggest company, their information tends to improve and improve and improve. And it's kind of a situation where you just have to retrain your customers. In some case, you're looking for a vehicle history report, not a named report. And there are strategies to even use both in some cases. Sometimes um, dealers will use the lesser cost vehicle history reports on auction cars, but yet use the primary named one on the front end of the store. So there's a number of ways you can get at this, but there's certainly opportunities to cut costs. So next steps. We covered about 20 ideas here, 10 of them really in the area of trying to tighten controls, reduce costs, improve planning, improve profitability in 24. And we also talked about 10 expense categories that certainly always prove to be productive. Our suggested next steps is build a small team, a management team with 3 to 4 leaders. Select 2 to 3 of the process improvements each quarter and implement them. You can't do it all at once, but if you attack them by quarter and set that objective and then go back and measure and report, that would be productive. On the same hand, take a look at those expense categories and look at 2 to 3 of those per quarter. Maybe January, February, March, you take a look at shop supplies, credit bureaus, and transportation small package. Take a look at those, but get your team involved to um, get everybody aligned around your objectives. You're trying to hit that $500,000 cost reduction objective for 2024, and then get your plan in place and then go after it. We can assist. We have a profit improvement program that has guaranteed ROI. We have a spend analysis that we can help you with. We have a contract tracker. We have an expense edge supplier management platform that'll provide data. You use the data and you do the work, kind of like Home Depot. We'll give you the help, but you do the project yourself. Ultimately, we got a lot of options out here, but we help you keep more of the money you've made. And that's our objective. Again, if you're interested in a copy of this deck today, scan that QR code and it'll take you to a landing page. We'll get your information and we'll know how to send you that deck. If you're interested in an estimate of your cost savings for your dealership group, give Chris Austin a call. He's our Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing, 612-386-3898. See Austin at strategicsource.com. And we can help you out. This is a good time of the year to be looking at 2024 now. Get your plans in place and and see if you can recover some of that profit that's eroding and higher costs. Suppliers are notorious right now the past year for raising prices, and it's a good time to put a stop to that. So I hope this was helpful. Rachel, any questions?
I think we're all good, Doug, but if anyone has any questions or thinks of anything later, you can send them to me and I could pass them along to Doug, or you can scan his QR code. Um, Doug, thanks for joining us today. We always look forward to having you on and appreciate all this valuable information that you leave us with. It is a lot, but it's so helpful. And there's so many things within these 20 steps that people don't think of. So just thank you for sharing with us.
You bet. My pleasure. Merry Christmas and happy holidays, everybody.
Again, you'll all be receiving a copy of this webinar by the end of this week. For more information about AIADA, visit aiada.org. Thanks for tuning in and making 2023 another successful year for us here at AIADA's Auto Talk. Happy holidays and see you all in 2024.